Today we're celebrating the statewide award winners for the LEH Humanities Awards 2012. We give these awards out every year to recognize achievements in the humanities in Louisiana.
I'm Dr. Michael Sartisky. I'm president of the Louisiana Endowment for the Humanities. If you're here for the Moskowitz bar mitzvah, you're in the wrong room. Okay. If you're here for the Washington and Lee wedding, you're in the wrong room. Okay. If you thought the Final Four was being played under the oaks, you are really in the wrong room. Okay. This is our annual opportunity to thank people who probably should have been thanked long before and many times. I thank you so much for joining us on this glorious day. Our auditor left the board meeting earlier, needing an 8-hour head start apparently to find parking for the Final Four game down in New Orleans tonight. Glad to see nobody in this room has that apprehension. First, I would like to introduce you to and thank the Lord of the Manor here. Kevin Kelly is the remarkable person who has taken a historic plantation home, restored it, and figured out a way to make it also an entrepreneurial center while respecting its historicity, also developing it in extraordinary ways. He also serves as chair of our board. Kevin, would you please stand, what little is left of you, and be recognized. Okay. I'd also like to ask the members of the board who are here with us today to also please stand. These are the people who give us our extraordinary vision and support. Please stand and be recognized around you. Okay. Thank you. Okay. And just because I have Alzheimer's and I forget things if I don't do them when they're in the forefront of my brain, I'd also like to ask my colleagues at the Louisiana Endowment for the Humanities who serve as staff to also please stand and be recognized. And last but not least, we wouldn't be able to bring on events like this were it not for corporate sponsors, in this instance, Iberia Bank, which has been sustaining this event for, I think, almost a half-dozen years at this point. Or is it two? Two. Oh, Capital One, yes, previously, and now Iberia Bank, and we are grateful for that support to make this happen. Our lifetime contribution to the Humanities Award will be made by what we like to call our national board member of the LEH, Dr. Kenneth Gladish. Ken started as my counterpart in Indiana 30 years ago. And unlike me, moved on to more elevated things. And he and his wife Kendall have joined us from Austin, Texas. Ken gets to make this award. And as he's speaking, I just want you to keep one thought foremost in your mind. Yes, Ken, I'm going to do it. Just think of the spirit of Woody Allen trapped in the body of Calvin Coolidge. I give you Ken Gladish. Okay? You look too bad.
Like many of you, I've had the privilege over the last several years to participate in this annual celebration and award ceremony. I'm reminded for all the awardees this afternoon, as well as in previous years, of this brief stanza, and for no other recognizee than for the gentleman we're about to recognize for this lifetime contribution. The stanza goes like this: "There is a destiny which makes us brothers and sisters. None goes their way alone. All that we send into the lives of others comes back into our own." The Louisiana Endowment for the Humanities is pleased to recognize filmmaker Glenn Petrie of New Orleans with a lifetime contribution to the Humanities Award. Praised as a legendary American regional director by none other than national film critic and scholar Roger Ebert, named a Knight in France, and awarded honorary doctorate, Petrie has long honored his home state with his entertaining and moving feature films, often blurring the lines between comedy, romance, and tragedy. But he has also been a conscientious and ferocious documentary filmmaker, weaving insight and substance into our historical and cultural record. Petrie was born in Cutoff, Louisiana, and worked his way through Harvard by working as a shrimp fisherman each summer, and not in the Atlantic. He returned to Louisiana, and by the age of 25 was known as the, quote, father of Cajun cinema. His early films, low-budget, quote-unquote, gumbo westerns, packed audiences into one-screen bayou movie houses. His breakthrough came in 1986 with his film Belisaire the Cajun. The film, which predated the nationwide Cajun craze, was a sensation at Cannes and Sundance. Since then, he has made a number of films, including the LEH-funded Haunted Waters, Fragile Lands, and Good for What Ails You, Secrets of the Indians and Bayou Indians. His wife, filmmaker Michelle Benoit, is a frequent collaborator on his projects. 2006 saw the release of the IMAX film Hurricane in the Bayou, a documentary written by Petrie about the devastating impact of Hurricane Katrina. The film, narrated by Meryl Streep and featuring Alain Toussaint, Amanda Shaw, and Chubby Carriere, reached an audience of thousands and still screens at the IMAX Theater in New Orleans. Glenn Petrie's work is motivated by the simple and universal desire to tell stories. Petrie traces the desire to an oral tradition he picked up from his own grandfather and his great-grandfather before him. From his commitment to bringing the stories of the Cajun people to worldwide audiences, the Louisiana Endowment for the Humanities honors him with the 2012 Lifetime Achievement Award. Glenn?
This is a terrible, terrible thing. I mean, there are 3 reasons why you get a Lifetime Achievement Award, and none of them are good. The most obvious is they're afraid if they wait a year or two, it'll be too late. I've been feeling pretty good, but I mean, Louisiana Endowment for the Humanities is the state's highest institution of non-school learning, so there's a chance they know something I don't. But I'm going to start tomorrow. I'm going to double down on my Lipitor, and we're going to hope for the best. Now, the second reason is almost as bad. They might want something. I'm not saying that's what it is, but you all know what Michael's like. And when you got that thing on the shelf, you know, it's real hard when they call to be on a panel to say, oh, I'm too busy, because you got that thing looking back at you. You don't know what the panels are like. Kind of like jury duty, except they send you a big box to read before you get there. Then there's a third reason. That's the worst one of all. But first, let me tell you a little story. 1976, state of Louisiana is getting ready to do its federally mandated bicentennial film. Every state was doing one. And so they went out to commission famous documentary filmmaker Ricky Leacock, the father of cinema verite. I mean, a legend even back then. Well, Ricky didn't take the gig. But he pawned off on him his protege. It was this 20-year-old kid named Glenn Petrie, who happened to be from Louisiana and didn't know nothing about nothing. Now, through pure dumb luck, I managed to successfully complete that film. But in the midst of it, I learned something. Telling stories is a fun way to make a living. I jump ahead 36 years. And there have been a lot of projects. You listed a bunch of them, and there have been the books and the museum exhibits and the this and the that and all those other things. All those things that got me one of those. And all the help along the way. A lot of those things would have never got made without LEH funding. And a lot of those, I remember walking into Michael's office and he'd say, "This is a crazy idea." And I say, "Yeah, but here's how we're going to do it." And a lot of those projects were done with, I see faces here of folks who were in the trenches, getting those museum exhibits up, getting those films made. I see folks who added some, let's say, some historical discipline to tamp down the dramatic exuberance I'd sometimes have too much of. I see my family here, two of my three brothers who helped along the way in everything from free legal advice to treating crew for spider bites. I see my mom, who at 86 is still chipping in on every single project. And most of all, my wife and partner, Michelle Benoit. And the dirty little secret there is she does a whole lot of the work I get credit for. Somehow we both like it that way. But anyway, 36 years later, here we are. And here's that third reason, and most awful reason, somebody gets a Lifetime Achievement Award. And that's that some very smart people are thinking, okay, you've been at the trough long enough. It's time to step aside. You know, go ahead and pass that baton. You know, it's time perhaps to get acquainted with that terrible word emeritus. Well, I got news for you, Michael. I'll happily take the award, but you're looking at one mule that plans to die in its traces. Telling stories is still a great way to make a living. Thank you. My first reaction to getting a Lifetime Achievement Award is I'm way too young. I'm not nearly finished with what I'm doing. Don't you want to wait a decade or two? But they said no, it was already on the program, so here I am.
I asked for the privilege of making this award to a longtime friend and colleague of mine and so many people in this room. The honor of the Humanist of the Year for 2012 is awarded to historian Patricia Brady, PhD, of New Orleans and Hammond. Few figures in Louisiana's public intellectual life are as indispensable as Dr. Patricia Brady. Her work as a historian has illuminated the lives of those who may otherwise have been relegated to footnotes, and her role as a public intellectual has made her a fixture in New Orleans and even around this country for decades. From thought-provoking biographies of American First Ladies Martha Washington and Rachel Jackson, to pioneering work on the free artist of color Julian Hudson, Brady's focus on the cultural and social aspects of our history gives us a richer understanding of New Orleans, of Louisiana, and of the United States as a whole. Her work adds romance, depth, insight, nuance, and humanity to figures that might otherwise seem austere and rigid and distant to us. John Berendt, the author of Midnight in the Garden of Good and Evil, described Dr. Brady's book on Rachel Jackson as, and I quote, a fast-paced political drama combined with a controversial love story that was shocking in its day. Patricia Brady's A Being So Gentle is frankly, and this is still Mr. Berendt, irresistible. When it comes to Dr. Brady's various scholarly and cultural endeavors, It might be easier to list what Dr. Brady has not done. Okay? Nonetheless, a mild attempt here. Brady has served as the Director of Publications for the Historic New Orleans Collection, President of the Tennessee Williams Literary Festival, President of the New Orleans Gulf South Booksellers Association, and as a faculty member at Dillard University. The Louisiana Endowment for the Humanities is thrilled to recognize such a tireless intellectual whose engaging work has reached an ever-widening audience of scholars, students, and citizens. Nominator Susan Larson described Dr. Brady's career as, quote, an example of a life lived as a humanist in the heart of a community. We heartily agree. Dr. Brady.
Thank you so much. One of the best things about today's program is that the other award winners are people that I've worked with for so long and whose work I admire so much, as well as looking around the room and seeing people for the last 40 years have been working hard to keep culture alive in Louisiana. And the party girls of New Orleans literature are here, as well as my companion, the artist, Michael Leday. For me, the humanities represent the best part of human creativity, the things that make life worth living. And I should say right now that from both Michael and Brian, I've been told that short is good and shorter is even better. So don't get afraid just because I have these papers in my hand. In my case, books are the basic building blocks of my career and life. My parents were obsessive readers who read to us practically from birth. They also taught us to read very early by ourselves so we wouldn't interfere too much with their own time of reading. A typical evening at the Brady household involved mother, daddy, and 3 little girls sitting in the living room reading silently to ourselves. Opening a cupboard or a closet door in our house was a dangerous thing. Books would come tumbling out, and every bookshelf was 3 deep with whatever we were reading. Every week we walked 6 blocks to the public library and checked out as many books as we could carry. So you had to get older so you could have more books to bring home. Since I came to Newcomb in 1961, one of my life rules is always to live within walking distance of the Tulane Library. 8 hours doing research in a library is my idea of a swell time. Whenever I'm stumped for just the fact I need, a librarian, one of God's angels, appears with the answer. In the interval when my parents weren't reading, they were great storytellers who told and retold family tales, the kind of tales that need to stay alive. Laugh out loud funny, scary, tragic. There was the great uncle who lived in a house with so many holes in the roof that he had to hold an umbrella while he was reading when it rained. Or the other uncle who started horsing around with his friends at a sawmill and died a bloody death. The uncles who survived D-Day and Anzio, and the one who fell in Normandy. The cousin whose falsie got caught in an accordion during a recital. The audience was fascinated and horrified, thinking that she was mutilating herself. And then there was my great-grandmother, who ran a boarding house for cotton brokers. No women allowed because they asked for too much service, and they might have been competition because she married off all 3 of her daughters to very well-to-do men. We learned from this that the past matters, and telling it well is very important. So I came to history, reading, discovering, recording, telling, writing. Who wouldn't love a discipline where you're praised and rewarded for reading other people's diaries and letters and trying to ferret out their secrets? And then there's the duty and the pleasure of being true to the people you're writing about, not to follow your own wishes or beliefs, but to tell their stories as truly and as entertainingly as you possibly can. I love books. I love everything about books: writing, designing, printing, reading, selling, celebrating at literary festivals like the Tennessee Williams Festival. My whole career has been a love letter to books and their power. And so I'm especially honored by this recognition of my devotion to the humanities by an organization that supports all the things I care about. Many thanks to Michael Sartisky and to the Louisiana Endowment for the Humanities. If I drop this and it crashes, I'm going to burst into tears. I was surprised, and I was really excited to share the award with the number of people who've won in the past, who are the leaders throughout the state, who are people who are so important to our culture.
This is why we do what we do. These are the people that make the effort worthwhile. For those of us who work in the endeavor of the humanities, whether individually or institutionally, I want to thank the rest of you who have joined us today as well, because you are the community that appreciates this work. You sustain it. In some cases, you've given birth to it. And in Louisiana, okay, our culture is even more fragile than our coastline. And it is the thing we can least take for granted. And it is absolutely crucial that we go back to our communities and make sure that our fellow citizens, and in particular those who purport to represent us in the place where democracy measures its priorities in dollars, in the state legislature, to make sure that this work is appreciated and that they understand that as we go, so potentially goes the culture of Louisiana. But to end on the more positive side, please join me in thanking each and every one of these individuals and institutions for the absolutely remarkable contribution they have made. Thank you.
We're celebrating all the people here who make the humanities possible for the people of Louisiana. I mean, Louisiana Endowment for the Humanities is a nonprofit organization, but it is the principal organization in the state of Louisiana that brings the humanities to the people of the state through various forms, either off-the-shelf programs that we develop and manage ourselves, such as Relic or Primetime, but also through grants to organizations. Many of the award recipients were people who received grants from us to do the various types of projects they did, whether it was film or whether it was publications for books and other things. So, we're really here as part of a larger community of people in the state from various institutions and individuals with various skills and interests, all with the same mission of bringing the public humanities to the people of Louisiana.
The humanities are vitally important in Louisiana because we have such a great culture and history in this state, so we have so much to celebrate and also preserve. I think that it's been important to make sure that everyone in this state, every citizen in every parish knows about the history and culture that is the great legacy of Louisiana, and we try and do that work every day, and we've been doing it for the last 40 years.
So many things we take for granted about how we live, what we eat, the music we listen to, the way we build our houses, the things that make us in Louisiana special. And just like, any good plant, it's got to get watered now and then. And an institution like Louisiana Endowment for the Humanities does that. It waters the plants of our culture, and it's really important that it stick around.
The humanities matter. They're what make us all human. They symbolize the life of the mind. Whether you're a doctor, a lawyer, a CEO, a ditch digger, if you can read and appreciate art and music, you'll have a full life.
The humanities has a word in it that's important. That's human. And basically it allows us to ask questions about ourselves, but in a critical manner, not in a self-indulging way. People ask questions about themselves in the framework of history or literature or film, a cultural examination of institutions that are, community-based or broad-based community institutions. And those are important because they help us make us better citizens, it makes us better parents, it makes us better voters, it makes us just better people in terms of people we relate to, whether it's people we know across the street or people we know in our towns and parishes or people we know as fellow voters in the state. It's all part of being a human in a highly informed way.
I think we really have great, great cultural treasures in the people and the resilient genius of this state. And I think when you look at the folks that we're honoring today, this state wouldn't know itself without the people that have done the work that we're celebrating today. And it's really, it's an honor for us to have been partners with them for years and years, and especially to be able to give back a little bit today and honor them and honor their families as Louisianans.
It's wonderful if people recognize the importance of the humanities in our lives. It's one of those things that, we don't talk about, we just absorb. And every now and then it's good to acknowledge, just like, the love of your family or the support of your community or all those things we take for granted. It's one of those things every now and then we've got to stop and be thankful for.
I'd like for people to go away today thinking the humanities do matter, and to support to support the state organization and their local organizations, to get out and do things for their libraries, to do things for their schools, to work with people who are illiterate. That's what the humanities are about.
And where can people go for more information?
People can visit www.leh.org for our website, and they can also visit a really new innovative tool that we're developing, NOLA.org. That's www.knowla.org. And that is the online encyclopedia of Louisiana's history and culture, which is free and accessible for all citizens in the state.